Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. and the United States, looking around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for the 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. As you know, we have a number of super regional bodies that come on to the Emerald Planet to talk about multinational projects and best practices. And the one that we're going to be featuring in this particular program is the OAS, the Organization of American States. And this is a group that represents 34 nations throughout the Latin America and the northern hemisphere. And it's absolutely a fantastic organization that's been doing good work for a long time. And to say that they have hundreds of best practices really is an understatement. And once you meet some of the people we're going to be interviewing about this, particularly this young man that's sitting right beside me, you'll be learning that as well. Mark Lambertes, who is the Division Chief, that's Energy Climate Change, Department of Sustainable Development for the OAS, Organization of American States. And Mark, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you, Sam.
And it's been a long time trying to get you guys on
indeed.
here. This has been almost 3 years talking with the OAS. But the work you're doing is so important that people really need to know about the OAS. So what is the OAS? And then we'll talk about your division.
Thanks. Thanks for having me, Sam. And I hope the wait will be worth it.
Oh, absolutely.
And yeah, the OAS, actually a lot of people in Latin America, Caribbean, and North America will know the Organization of American States as an entity that really focuses in on democracy, human rights, elections, transborder issues. But I'm representing a group within the OAS really that doesn't specifically tend to those matters. Rather, we are within the broader framework of economic development. And certainly, we believe at the Organization of American States that a positive economy, that economic growth and development and happier citizens will lead to stronger democracies. So within the organization, we have very vibrant programs in the economic development realm. Within that, I come from a group called the Department of Sustainable Development. So within economic development, we are focusing particularly on the matters of sustainable development, which include issues like biodiversity, transboundary water, aquifers, solid waste management, and other issues. And me particular, I represent a team that focuses in on energy and climate change mitigation. So really in a nutshell, what we're trying to do is help the member states, the 34 member states of this hemisphere, make better decisions and a transition to cleaner and more sustainable energy and climate-friendly solutions for the future.
Well, I really like your logo. This is absolutely incredible, and it really encompasses everything that needs to be done as far as your particular division is concerned. Tell us a little about the logo itself and the importance of this and how that really is projecting a very positive image throughout all the member states of the OAS.
Well, the logo, I would say there's really two things represented here that you'll see. One is the organization itself, which are the flags of the hemisphere. And so the flags coming together really represents the unity of the Americas. And the other logo is a key partnership that we manage called the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas. And that's an attempt to represent the environment, the importance of clean energy, which could come from the sun, from water, from biofuels, and from wind and other natural resources that are renewable.
Yeah, and also having the Western Hemisphere within the globe. It's very telling what you're doing. Tell us a little bit about this chart and the importance of this, and then we'll get into just some of the inner workings as far as your division is concerned.
Sure. What I'm trying to say here is that the Americas, but here we're really focused in on Latin America. Latin America is really one of the more diverse hemispheres of the world, or regions of the world, in terms of its resources that come together for electricity production. You'll see on here the predominance of hydropower and natural gas that are the two major fuel sources used for Latin America in terms of power generation. Increasingly, we're seeing wind and other renewables play in that mix. And so the diversity of the electricity alternatives is quite significant.
Well, I think it's really important, and I like this balance of energy and climate change because it's really necessary to look at how these interplay because, again, going back to environment and economic development, and I know the OAS, even though it's representing all these member states as far as policy and other issues, really is trying to focus on economic development and sustainability throughout all the member states.
That's right. One of the things that people may not realize is that the Latin American region, actually Latin America and the Caribbean together, has really done a fabulous job of rural energy, rural electrification. They've extended power lines and used microgrids and even household systems with solar and other alternatives to dramatically increase the supply of modern electricity, modern energy services to the rural poor throughout this hemisphere over the last couple of decades. So now we're really looking at a challenge that is relatively small on a global scale. We're talking about 10% of the population of the hemisphere, which is still an important problem. I can't emphasize enough that we must continue to address. About 35 million people in the Western Hemisphere that continue to lack access to modern electricity. But certainly the challenge is not as great as you'll see in other regions of the world. So really our focus is about cleanliness of the power source, about reliability, about quality of power, and other modern challenges that we're able to face in terms of helping the countries providing climate-friendly energy solutions.
Well, you have your division, which is really focused on these areas. Then you have the OAS as a super regional body that's really focused on the whole hemisphere. So looking at the challenges that we have in the Western Hemisphere, where you have Canada to the north,
right,
all the way down to Argentina in the south, what is some of the major challenges that we really are facing besides these 34 million that need access to that? What are some of the other challenges that we have across this very diverse landscape and climatic zones?
Really, the hemisphere is blessed with a wide variety of renewable and fossil natural resources. You will have seen on the previous slide that was up an example of a geothermal location that happens to be from St. Lucia. So there are a number of places around the world where there's geothermal reserves. That next slide represents biofuels, and you'll know that in Brazil, it's the #1 producer, one and two between the U.S. and Brazil producers of liquid biofuels. That's ethanol and biodiesel produced from sugar cane, but we also have an abundance of other bioenergy feedstocks that can be utilized. We have lots of wind resources, but we also have oil and natural gas throughout the region. And when you talk about the challenges herein, it really is about getting access to those natural resources and getting them where they're needed the most. So it's whether it's shipping natural gas from Canada to the United States to the Caribbean, whether it's about oil, as in the Central American region, which is blessed with the potential to interconnect, to send electricity north to south. This is the CIEPAC interconnected system throughout Central America, which allows for electricity transfers, and all the different sources of electricity which can potentially be shared but require interconnection to do so.
Well, looking at this map that we have here, Mark, it's really interesting how really the northern and southern hemispheres really do fit together very nicely. And it's almost like they're a mirror image of each other as far as the natural resources that we have, and then the intellectual dynamics of both of these, and then the numbers of people. We have this north-south exchange of labor, and it's just interesting how they really do fit together very nicely.
That is true, and there's really great potential to extend that level of collaboration and cooperation among both countries and sub-regions of this hemisphere. We're looking forward to a day when even Central America is interconnected with South America via Panama and Colombia for electricity. And certainly it's not impossible to envision a time when the Caribbean nations are connected for power. Obviously, it's a unique challenge when you're an island nation, but advanced technologies do allow for subsea transmission cable. And so we've been doing some work together with the World Bank and other multilaterals under the Connecting 2022 umbrella, trying to explore the potential for interconnection throughout the Caribbean islands such that electricity can be more efficiently transferred between small island nations in that region.
Well, looking at, I want to keep the slide up for just a minute, you know, the whole thing about having renewables, this distributive power generation areas, when you're looking at this, a lot of this is really based on renewables. And some of it natural gas, of course, Trinidad, Tobago, and those areas. But it's amazing the amount of renewables that you have and the number of sun days, and then, of course, the wave and other types of energy that can be created here. It's just, we really need to be looking, you know, much more diligently at all this. And your division is actually leading that charge in all these different areas, and I think even hydrogen, correct?
Well, we are working hard, particularly in the Caribbean, to increase the development use of renewables. The sad reality is the overwhelming abundance of electricity produced in the Caribbean comes from imported oil. And so almost 100% of that region is oil-based. And so we're trying to help the countries consider an alternative, which would be to make use of their geothermal, wind, and solar to power their needs in that region.
Yeah, and of course, as I was mentioning earlier, if we get hydrogen in that mix, of course, Iceland as a nation is really focused on hydrogen because of all the water that they have and what's surrounding them in that area. But I think one of the things, too, that you've looked at is this whole thing of energy conservation and the reduce of energy, because they say the largest power source that we have is what we're not using.
That's right. It's widely assumed that 20 to 25% reduction in power consumption is quite possible with relatively low cost investments. So that's right. Saving a kilowatt of electricity is almost always cheaper than producing a new one, and that's a strategy that we are working together with many of the member states to encourage. Efficient appliances, conservation methodologies, and even at the utility level, more efficient transmission and distribution.
Well, looking at the solar we have here, I know this is something that's a big push. United States specifically, but many other nations throughout Latin America are really pushing on solar and wind, renewable resources. And this is a fantastic photograph here. I mean, this is almost an idyllic scene as far as having the beach, but also the production of energy. And it's interesting how Brazil really is becoming a world leader in the total mix as far as energy is concerned.
Well, Brazil really has a lot of opportunity. It has oil, it has a lot of natural resources, it's producing liquid biofuels, but those best practices can really be replicated around the region.
Right. Well, Mark Lambertes, Division Chief, Energy and Climate Change, Department of Sustainable Development, thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folks, but for others, it might take a little more work. And for those who haven't started, there are still things you can do to catch up.
Oh, that is good news.
Like getting out from underneath past debt. And don't get wrapped up with high-interest credit cards.
Get you some eyes.
Be diversified with your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Your financial goals are not out of reach. The choice is clear. For a happy ending, choose to save.
Everyone with alcohol and drug addiction is in the same boat. With treatment, you can find solid ground. For drug and alcohol information and treatment referral for you or someone you know, call 1-800-662-HELP.
Dude, are you sure you want this tattoo? Because just do it.
Some mistakes in life are permanent. Like hearing loss. To learn how to protect your hearing, visit ASHA.org.
You've probably heard about heart disease, but did you know that it's the #1 killer of women nationwide? Heart disease claims more lives each year than breast cancer, lung cancer, or strokes combined. But there are steps you can take to protect yourself against it. For more information on how you can prevent heart disease, contact your local American Heart Association or visit their website at www.americanheart.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the President and Executive Director of Emerald Planet TV, coming to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that we're moving forward in the 21st century. As we move towards 2050, how are we going to be able to take care of 2 billion new people that are going to join us on the planet and provide them not just a subsistence, but an increased standard of living? And the gentleman that's joining me from the OAS, the Organization of American States, his name is Juan Cruz Monticelli, who is the Senior Energy Specialist. Very important job, Juan. And he is in the Energy and Climate Partnership of the America's ECPA Clearinghouse. Juan, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's bring up, we got your slide up here with your logo, and this is really nicely done. Tell us a little bit about the Energy and Climate Partnership of the OAS, but quick, what's the OAS? And then we'll go into the Clearinghouse.
The OAS is a hemispheric organization which gathers the 34 independent nations of the Americas, from all the way from Argentina to Canada. And OAS focuses mostly on democracy, human rights, but we also work a lot on energy and sustainable development.
I think that's very important because people can't feed themselves, take care of their families or their communities. It's very tough to do these other things. Tell us a little bit about your logo, what you're demonstrating here, and then we'll talk about this term clearinghouse. That's intriguing.
Well, what we emphasize at the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas is precisely sustainability in the use of energy and the use of natural resources. So that's why you see the sun, the earth, the biomass represented by that little leaf, and the wind. And that's the emphasis that we put on the kinds of resources that we see for the future of energy in the Americas and the world.
Well, I was actually attended this conference that you had, this fifth session in Trinidad and Tobago, and there was a lot of information there about the environment and also economic development, this balance that you have between everything that's going on. But how does this type of summit lead to all these different resources then into a clearinghouse to spread across the 34 member states of the OAS?
Well, yes, the fifth summit of the Americas, which was held in Trinidad and Tobago, is a summit that gathers every 2 years or so, and any issue that is relevant or of importance to the Americas is basically discussed in that forum. And on that occasion, President Obama highlighted the importance of energy security for the Americas and invited the countries of the Americas and the Caribbean to join in this ECPA partnership.
Well, this whole thing about having, this is something that's very interesting as far as the Caribbean and Latin America. It's a very dynamic area. It's quite diverse. So when you look at the diversity not only of peoples and cultures, but also of energy sources, how do you balance out everything that's going on in that mix, and then also to weave into their conservation and reduction of use of energy?
Well, there is a discussion, an ongoing discussion about how to use resources, what types of the resources to use, and how to use them. So what we do at EGBA is basically we set 7 pillars, which actually most of them were agreed by the countries. And well, the first one is obviously energy efficiency, because it is always easier to save energy than it is to produce it, and it's also cheaper.
Well, that's one of the main ways of actually expanding and dealing with energy, is to actually conserve what's already here.
Precisely. I mean, if you think into consideration the amount of reserves in energy, particularly fossil fuels, and you are more efficient in their use, you can extend the life of those resources.
Exactly. And even if you're extending and reducing, then that even less of renewables means less infrastructure, less investment, less cost as far as energy is concerned.
And it also means a different kind of investment. So it opens new opportunities for new businesses, new jobs,
right.
New education for people, and a new culture in energy, and the change of paradigms. And that's what really EGBA is all about.
Mm-hmm. Let's go through these 7 pillars, because I find this intriguing, and the logos tell us a lot about that at the same time.
Well, I already mentioned energy efficiency. We have renewable energy. Renewable energy is an infinite source of energy. I mean, okay, granted, the sun might go off 10 million years from now, but I think we have time.
That's right. I think we won't have to worry about those 10 million years from now.
For a little bit while. We also talk about cleaner and more efficient use of fossil fuels. We're talking about energy infrastructure, which is something that is not as much of a challenge in our region as it is in other regions, such as Africa, where pretty much a lot remains to be done. A lot was done already in Latin America, but there are still some challenges. We're talking about energy poverty. There is still about 35 million people without access to energy in the Americas, particularly electricity in rural areas. We're also talking about sustainable use of forests and land, and this is a major source of CO2 emissions. The burning of forests and the misuse or the mismanagement of forests. And of course, the last pillar, adaptation, because we've already done some damage, unfortunately. So we have to take care of what was done and adapt to it, and then make sure we don't make things worse in a way.
Yeah, and that goes to because so much of both hemispheres, the northern and southern hemisphere, and of course the SIDS, the small island nations, are in many ways surrounded by water. So sea level rise is a real issue. But looking at why is the ECPA structure divided into those 7 areas? Is this to make it more efficient to deal with focusing on each of these? It's much easier for the nation states to work together and collaborate to generate different types of energy sources. Why the 7 pillars?
I think the 7 pillars really are, if you think about it, what else is there other than adaptation, renewables, energy efficiency? So really the 7 pillars focus on every aspect or every issue relating to energy and climate that can be thought of. I'm not saying that there aren't other issues that shouldn't be taken into consideration, but I think we pretty much cover everything with 7 pillars. And it's also an agreement of the governments of the Americas, which discussed their challenges and their concerns vis-a-vis energy and climate, and that's how this list came.
Mm-hmm. Well, looking at the differences among the nations, just looking at this high energy wood stove, when I was down in Mexico, we were looking at a number of the experimental stations that were developing these, and actually out into the rural areas where I had a chance to observe these being used. But looking at it from a regional level, how are you sharing through the clearinghouse? And I wanted to go to this clearinghouse concept, these different approaches being used, because a very great difference between Canada, the United States, and then some of the Central American nations as an example, and lifestyle and use of resources and all that. So how does the clearinghouse breach that gap so that the 34 million being left out are now being brought into it, but also to advance the agenda for more renewables?
Well, there are 34 countries in the Americas, and all these countries have governments and people working towards these challenges, to address these challenges of energy access, energy security, climate change, adaptation. So, so we think, well, there are all these smart people working on these topics, on these subjects, spending a lot of money, a lot of efforts in making things better for their people. So how do we make sure that all this knowledge doesn't get lost? So, and that's how the clearinghouse, the ECBA clearinghouse comes into play, because what we do is precisely try to concentrate all this information and disseminate it to the governments of the Americas, to the private sector, to NGOs, etc.
Yeah, and looking at this, this goes to the heart of the different types of cultures, lifestyles, socioeconomic backgrounds, and all that. But anything that we can do in one nation to help advance the quality of life and education and knowledge and understanding in the other is really what the OAS and the partnership for the clearinghouse is all about, correct?
Exactly, and what we're seeing here are some examples of things that we're trying to do. Like, for example, if you look at those very elementary, rudimentary lighting devices. I mean, those people, for example, in that picture, they're burning diesel sometimes because they don't even have kerosene, so they burn whatever they have to have lights at night. So what we do is we say, okay, well, let's think of something so that they don't intoxicate themselves, so that they can have some light at night. And so we have these devices such as solar lamps, so that people can still have a life at night. They can study, they can share a meal with their families. And these are very basic, simple concepts. But when you think about it, people living in the Amazon might not have that luxury. And so that's what we try to provide.
And this is the whole thing about the diversity among the Americas, is that you go from the heart of the Amazon basin and you go all the way up to Machu Picchu, and you're 13,000 feet above sea level, and everything in between. And so the fact of your clearinghouse and the work that you're doing, Juan, as the energy specialist, it's just amazing what you have to know and what you're seeing really on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, and it's very amazing how you can impact people's lives. We've seen OAS, from the Organization of American States, we basically work mostly with governments, and we also try to work with grassroots organizations. And that's when you really see the difference, like how the work of an organization can change people's lives.
And I'm just going back between these two slides here. I mean, you go from this slide all the way over to this. I mean, it's just incredible, the diversity that we have in the Western Hemisphere. And then you come to this with the high amount of wind, and then also solar and hydro and others. I mean, there really is abundance of resources.
Oh, absolutely. And our region is very, very wealthy in terms of energy resources, particularly renewables. And so I think, and there is a big question here, is how is the Americas as a region going to position itself vis-a-vis energy in the future? Because the future of energy is going to be very different 50 years from now. Not even, I would say even 20 years from now. So what are we going to do?
Yeah. Well, we're going to go out, Juan, where you see how fast time goes as far as the Emerald Planet is concerned, but we'll go out with this as the background, because it really is important that we look at all these resources, and to have someone like yourself that's out there, that's working across all these different countries and socioeconomic groups and all that, it's very important. But we have Juan Cruz Monticelli, who is the Senior Energy Specialist, and thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
She's had more than a dozen fractures. And in the next few years, she faces 2 major surgeries to strengthen her fragile bones. She's only 10 years old. Most people don't worry about fragile bones until late in life. For those with osteogenesis imperfecta, brittle bones are a concern throughout their lifetime. Find out how you can strengthen this child's future.
Diabetes is a killer. After I was diagnosed, I didn't feel sick, so I didn't listen to my doctor. Then it struck. I had a heart attack, then a stroke, and I was only 49.
Most people with diabetes also have high blood pressure and cholesterol, which can cause severe heart damage. In fact, 2 out of 3 people with diabetes die from heart disease or stroke.
Don't let diabetes destroy your life.
Call for your free diabetes survival guide. Choose to live.
back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet, come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices that are making a difference as we move towards 2050. Many people are saying is how can the planet accommodate 2 billion new people that we're proposed to have by that time, and maybe some 11 to 12 billion people by the end of the century. And so we have to be much more intuitive, clever, researching and how we're going to economize as far as the resources that we have, at the same time to protect the planet and enhance the quality of life and not just have people coming and existing. And we have someone who's working on a very interesting concept. This is Ruben Contreras, who is the Energy and Climate Change Engineer. He's in the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas, the ECPA clearinghouse under the Organization of American States. And Ruben, I'm going to have, that's a very long title. I'm going to have you just give us a brief intro as far as what the OAS is, and then we'll get into the clearinghouse, but we're going to talk about this closed loop cycle production system, which is really the focus of what we're going to talk about.
Perfect. Thank you for having me here today. It's a real pleasure.
Oh, thank you for being with us. We're pleased to have you.
Basically, what is the OAS? It's an international organization that is dealing basically with democracy, human rights, those kind of issues, and supporting 34 member states. And so that is basically what we, as an organization, we do. And under this organization, we have the Department of Sustainable Development, which is the technical branch. In that department in particular, we promote, new technologies, the policy developing, and so on.
Well, I know this balance between the energy and climate, I think this is a very smart way to put this, because when you look at the energy and climate change, it's about energy, economy, and the environment. You've got those three, and you're trying to balance that. So as a professional and as an engineer, how do you keep all three of those in balance as you're considering what we want to do, how we're going to develop the best practices as we move forward in the 21st century?
So basically, to start answering that, I would like to say that what is the current paradigm that we have, for example, at the manufacturing sector, where we are consuming a lot of resources, we are wasting a lot of energy, and at the same time we're polluting the environment. So in that regard, we need to look at that and see what we can do, what is the next step. And then appear this concept of closed loop cycle production, and based with cradle-to-cradle concepts.
So this is really very interesting, this cradle-to-cradle concept, and of course this brings up all kinds of images, as you're well aware. But this closed-loop cycle production, what does that really mean? And then we'll go this C2C route.
Exactly. Let me give you an idea about what is the current paradigm that we have, which is called the cradle-to-grave, and it's basically we extract we take the resources from the earth, we produce products. But at the end of the useful life, all these products become waste. So we are wasting energy, we are wasting resources, and that is what we call a linear process. So from one stage to another one, and without reuse those materials.
Well, this cradle to grave, and as you know, and this is why we're getting to this closed loop cycle production, is that we no longer can afford that, because what we now consider waste, or have considered waste in the 19th, the 20th, and now the early part of the 21st century, really is a renewable resource. And so that's what you're moving to. So tell us about this this chart and how this C2C. What's C2C? Cradle to cradle.
C2C is a philosophy, I will say, cradle to cradle. And basically what we propose with that is a paradigm shift from the cradle to grave to the cradle to cradle. And we need to rethink what we are doing. That's why you can see at the slide, highlighting the rethink. So that's the first step. So once we rethink what we are doing, we will be able to see what we're doing with our primary resources that we're using. In this case, it could be materials, it could be energy. So what we would like to propose is, rather than manufacturing products to become waste, that waste is equal to food. So we can reutilize that resources and basically remanufacture, redo new materials, redo new buildings, whatever,
Now, this is something that we've been working with the European community, European Union, for a number of years in Emerald Planet. And this is one of the things that I thought was really intriguing, because if you look at the barcode on everything that's produced in the European Union, there must have a code in there as far as what it's going to be the next useful life of that particular, whether it's steel, it's aluminum, it's rubber, it's plastic, whatever it is, in the barcode before it's ever even manufactured, they already know where it's going to go. And I think that's what you're talking about, Ruben, is this, we already know and we plan for in advance, so it doesn't become waste, but it becomes just another step in the supply chain.
Exactly, absolutely. And something that is very key, fundamental to understand, is we need to rethink about the materials that we are using right now. A lot of the materials that we're using in computers, even a book, are very toxic materials. So we need to think how to replace those materials to something more healthy. And that is part of the rethink, because at the end of the useful life, you don't want to create more waste. You want to create something healthy to reuse and to put it again on the manufacturing system.
Well, I think, Ruben, when you say to rethink and reuse and going back, let me just back up in the steps that we have here as we go through all that. And then we come down to this very complex slide here. Tell us a little bit about what we're seeing and how does that fit into the C2C concept that you have?
Well, first, the closed loop cycle defines a circle. So we're talking that the materials will flow in this circle indefinitely. So that's the key, that's the goal, that we reuse all the materials.
It's like the Lion King, the circle of life, correct?
Exactly,
yes.
Exactly. So as you can see, we try to avoid the disposal. So we don't want waste. That's the part that we need to avoid. And transportation is key in this case, because we're using a lot of, every time you produce, let's talk about the logistic here, and transportation is very key. So every time we move materials from one side to another side, it needs to make sense. I mean, imagine you have a product in Taiwan and someone is using that product in Chile, for example, in South America. So how many miles, how many energy are you wasting in that? So we're thinking also in local economy and create this kind of circular virtual circle, so everything comes to the same place.
Well, and this goes back to this new very high technology printer, which really is not a printer. It's really creating new products, and almost anything you can conceive of, you can actually put in. They're even now trying to figure out how to print food, which I find is incredible. But looking at this particular chart that you have here, what you're saying is that we need to be taking all the resources that we have, even the energy, and make sure that there's always a next use. Is that what you're saying, Ruben?
Exactly. Well, and something that you said at the beginning, I mean, in the coming years, we will be, close to 9 billion inhabitants on planet Earth, and we are depleting our non-renewable abiotic resources, and so we need to think about that. In the next coming years, we will have issues to access those resources if we continue depleting those resources, and at the same time, we need to use and promote the use of renewable energies, but in particular, low entropy energy, like the solar energy, for example.
So you've got the solar, you have the wind, and also there's something about, as far as the Western Hemisphere, is a tremendous opportunity for wave and DC power that, it really is not being tapped at this time.
Exactly. So when we talk about closed loop cycle, it's a very cross-cutting issue. We're talking about how to use renewable energy, how to introduce energy efficiency methodologies, how to improve the use of water, how to reduce the waste that we are introducing in the environment. So,
well, looking at this whole thing, Ruben, I'm going to skip over to this next one here because this is a complex issue, but it's really is how do you allow all the citizens, the people in the Western Hemisphere to work together to use local resources and also to be able to reinvest in those local communities so no one is getting left out. I mean, I think that's the ideal of the OAS, correct?
Absolutely. And we work supporting the 34 countries, and that is part of what it is sustainable development. So, and that's why the OAS is involved in this closed loop cycle production project, and we have been piloting some projects. For example, you can see at the picture the case of Ecuador. We certify a packaging product, which is the first one in Latin America, so which is a great goal for us.
Yeah, and I think this is something, Ruben, everything that you're doing is you're really raising the level of sophistication, the transfer of knowledge, the development of intellectual property throughout the entire hemisphere, so there's no one nation state or just a group of nations that really have a monopoly on this. And I think this C2C is really a way to go about that.
Absolutely, and there is a long way to go still. We need more capacity building activities. We need to make people aware of this concept because this is not just a manufacturing sector. We're talking about consumers. We have consumers. They need to be aware what they are consuming. So when they have a cradle-to-cradle product, they will notice the difference compared with a traditional product. So at the same time, you're opening, there is a new opportunity there for small business enterprises.
Well, we only have about 15 seconds left. What do you see for the future of C2C?
I see a bright future. We are with a lot of opportunities, and I hope that we will see this paradigm shift becoming a reality.
Oh, I think it's fantastic, and it seems like as an engineer with your personality and your knowledge, Ruben, I think it's a very bright future as far as the OAS is concerned, the clearinghouse, and the whole hemisphere. So thank you for being with us, and thank you for joining us as we talk about cradle to cradle as we look to create Emerald Planet.
Art, a universal language, an expression of culture, of self. And now, thanks to Empowered Women International, a way for emerging and established immigrant and refugee artists and artisans to find hope to earn a living while enriching the lives of all of us. Empowered Women International, making a better America every day. For more information on Empowered Women International's educational programs or to make a tax-free donation, contact cfrip at AOL.com.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America and Reading is Fundamental.
to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. and the United States. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the President, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet and the Emerald Planet TV. We're looking around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for the 1,000 best practices that can be used, the technologies, the services, and the products as we move through the 21st century. So as we're doing that and we're looking to accommodate 2 billion new people that are going to be added to the planet by 2050, how are we going to actually increase the standard of living, the quality of life, and at the same time to be able to protect the environment? And leaders in this, of course, are going to be the females that are leading this charge into the 21st century, because they're the ones that in many ways are closest to the community, taking care and raising the children. And so they're very much attuned and aware of the future generations and what needs to be done as far as dealing with 3 and 4 and 5 generations ahead of us as we move towards the 22nd century. And so Carolina Pena is the program manager of what's called the Caribbean Sustainability Energy Program, CSEP, of the Organization of American States. But Carolina, you're really doing much more than just the energy part of this. Tell us a little bit about the Caribbean Sustainability Energy Program of the OAS.
Okay, well, it is the Caribbean Sustainable Energy Program. So the OAS, the Organization of American States, recognize the real challenges that the member states have related to the use of energy, and specifically the Caribbean region.
And this is something that's very important that I don't think many people are conscious of, that the Caribbean states are very much very important to the economy, to society, to intellectual development of the whole hemisphere.
Correct. And the thing is that, as we said, the Caribbean, as you can see from the map, are very diverse, and a lot of countries are from the Caribbean. And specifically the Eastern Caribbean state, which is the countries that has been focuses on the Caribbean Sustainable Energy Program, has a very exclusive dependency on fossil fuel. As a consequence, they are very vulnerable to the prices of the oil that is very changing right now, and that create a lot of prices go up. So the consumers that are from the Caribbean have to pay some of the highest tariff around the world.
Yeah, I was going to say, having actually lived in Jamaica, visited many of the countries in the Caribbean area for professional work, and also for the Emerald Planet. And in many of these countries, it's quite expensive as far as the energy is concerned. And then you look at the cost of, say, diesel or gasoline in those areas. In some places, it could be $7 or $8 US per gallon. And then when you look at the incomes that many of these people have, it's amazing how anybody can do that. And so looking at the work that you're doing, sustainable energy, I'm emphasizing that, it's really important when they have the sun, they have the wind, they have the wave action, and even geothermal and many others throughout this area. So looking at your particular program in the OAS, how are you actually enhancing or encouraging these countries to really look at renewables and wean themselves off of, in essence, the diesel generator?
Well, I just want to make a quick comment on what you indicated. I remember very clearly the first consultation that we have in Dominica, which is one of the smallest islands in the Eastern Caribbean. They were saying, a participant that was in the audience, that sometimes they pay highest costs in the electricity bill than the cost that they pay for the rent. So that kind of touched me and says that, oh my God, like these countries really need an assistant to diversify their energy, because the thing is that this island, as you mentioned, they have a lot of indigenous resources that are untapped. So what we help with the Caribbean Sustainable Energy Program is to facilitate to the governments to be able to have the promotion of renewable energy and also to provide efficiency on the usage of the electricity and also transportation, which is another big cost that the countries have to pay.
Well, looking at this and kind of leaping ahead, but you look at a country like Grenada, a very small country, but also rich in the renewable resources, maybe not so much as far as the fossil fuels. And so if you could take a place here where you're actually using wind, solar, wave, and hydro, and then and they're small country states, so have more and more automobiles that are either electric or, they have what they call extended range engines on that. There are just so many ways that actually people can get off of the importation of fossil fuels, reduce the loss of hard currencies, which is very important for health care and education and basic infrastructure. So looking at a country like Grenada, how do you educate to help them move forward as far as looking at use your own resources?
Well, in the case of Grenada, as well as in the other 6 countries that are part of this initiative, we not only focuses on developing the national energy policies that you provided in the slides before, but we try to enforce the capacity building of the different citizens. And in this slide here, you can see the different stakeholders that we try to provide the education and awareness of the benefits of using the sustainable energy, that they don't have to rely only on fossil fuel, because it's not only given the high tariff in their electricity, but also they can have problem in energy security, because they depend from imported fossil fuel. So if there is a delay on a chip that is coming with the fuel, they're not going to have electricity. So they have a really problem on dependency on that.
Well, going to in all that Carolina, if you look at a country like Haiti and some of the others where almost all the forests have been taken away because people are producing charcoal, and of course that's adding to particulate matter, it's adding to many different types of respiratory diseases, so you have increased cost as far as health care, decrease as far as longevity and energy to do work. There's many social costs to these fossil fuels in these SIDS, these small island developing nations.
Correct. The governments are having a lot of problems on doing those financing the fuels, and that's what they are decreasing the amount of social investment that they can do, for example, on infrastructure or education. So we don't want to be the only agency that has been working with the governments, so we are trying to provide some of the needs that the governments require. So in this slide, we can present some of the assistance that we provided to build the capacity in the house, because we don't want to bring international consultants coming into the islands and do their work and go out. What we try to do is to provide the building capacity from locals in the country. So we did a lot of energy audits in buildings, so we can tell the governments what are the areas that they can save energy. And also in other countries, for example in St. Lucia, we provide funding to do a retrofit of electricity saving lightings, like LED lights.
Yeah, because you can save about maybe 75 to 80% as far as the energy using LED over the old fluorescent bulbs. But the whole thing is, just looking at these slides we have here, Carolina, what you're looking at, and people just see this as solar panels, but this is actually green jobs. It's opportunities in local communities. It's bringing lights at night so children can study, families can enjoy their time together instead of it gets dark and then you're lighting up a kerosene lamp or using charcoal or something like that. It just absolutely chokes these houses. And having traveled throughout the region for over the last almost 40 years, I've had a chance to live in these places, and when you start adding the renewables, it just increases the quality of life about everything in the local communities.
That's totally correct.
Yeah. So looking at these, the solar panels and these systems out to the sea, what are you seeing as far as the work that you're doing in the program for the sustainable energy? How are you actually encouraging people and getting the governments involved in this?
Well, there are several options that you can do. So I was very blessed that I was able to manage this program because it allowed me to hear the people, to hear what are the gaps and priorities that they have, and based on those, propose some options. So some of them, it was to, for example, give information to architects, engineers, people that are in charge of developing standards on how to build a greenhouse or green efficiency buildings. So we present options that they can utilize in the short term so they can be more conscious about the environment. Another option that is really important is the financing. Institutions that doesn't have financing for people that want to become energy efficient is impossible if they don't have the money. So we have to provide the financiers to present options that they can be able to get the resources and be able to finance energy efficiency appliances.
Well, looking at this slide, we've almost run out of time. As you can tell, Carolina, it goes very quickly. We have about 30 seconds. How do you see the future in involving people in creating their own energy?
I believe that the future generations of the small island states can be the area where it can become the change and the change of paradigm of the Caribbean, and not only in the Caribbean, but the Latin America. So what we present is information about the science behind the renewables. So in the classes, as you can see from the pictures, a student will be able to address those challenges.
Well, we're going to go out. We have all the credits here, and you've done an absolutely fantastic job. And what you're doing, since I've traveled to most of the SIDS nations, I just think it's absolutely fantastic. And as I was saying earlier, we want to work with you and try to highlight as far as the what's going on. So thank you for being with us, for sharing everything you have. And it's important that we really